Very excited to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Tamsen Butler, who is the award-winning author of the book called The Complete Guide to Personal Finance for Teenagers and College Students. In fact, she's written a bunch of other books, and I appreciate her spending the time today because she is a busy mom and journalist. So, Tamsen, tell me something. How much does the average teenager really know about personal finance?
You know, I think they know more now than in years past. For several reasons. A lot of these teenagers, when they were young children, that's when there was a foreclosure on every block and the economy was in the news and everybody was talking about how do we get ourselves into this mess. So it was a conversation that everybody was having, unlike in years past when money just wasn't really discussed. So a lot of these teens have grown up seeing the adults in their lives struggling, and I think that compels them to want to know how to not get into the same mess.
Don't we find a lot of kids today seem to nonetheless feel this kind of sense of entitlement that they're not really focusing on the worth of a dollar?
I think in some sense, yes, and in some sense, no. I think a lot of that has to do with the media and, the accessibility to seeing people who have far more money than a lot of us could ever imagine. I mean, they have their social media profiles and, they're on TV. So all a teen has to do is go online and here's somebody on their yacht in the Mediterranean and making it look normal.
Well, I do have a pretty good imagination, but I do understand that could be a problem. You're saying that the kids actually do know something about personal finance?
I think they do. I don't think it's a taboo topic, and I don't think it's something that they ignore either. I think that they have a sense that it's something that they're going to have to learn eventually. At least that's what I hope.
And how do they feel when they hear about topics like budgeting and financial responsibility?
I think the initial response is, oh, how boring. But on the other hand, it depends on how it's presented to them. If it's presented as, you sit down, I'm going to teach you how to budget, then they're going to roll their eyes and want to do anything but. However, if it's something they've always been exposed to, their parents have always been open about money and how to manage it and how to handle it, then it just becomes second nature.
But so many families seem rather closed about it, and parents, quite frankly, often don't discuss money with their kids. What do you do in a case like that if the time has come to bring some reality into a teenager's world and he's never really had the an experience with it?
Yeah, I really do dissuade parents from being closed off about money. I know a lot of parents have problems with that, particularly if they have trouble managing their own money. They're a little embarrassed. They don't want their kids to know, hey, I've got this much in credit card debt and I can't pay this bill or something like that. I think that's when parents need to kind of set their own pride aside and sit down and show their kids, here's what we're doing with our money. Here's the mistakes we've made. And this is why we can't take a vacation this year, that sort of thing.
Well, that could be a real pleasant conversation.
Oh, I mean, it's not pleasant by any means if you haven't been managing your money correctly. But I mean, kids learn, teenagers and kids, they learn by what they see, whether they realize it or not. And if they see their parents floundering with money, they're going to make a note of that and say, okay, this is what I should not do if I don't want to flounder with money when I get older too.
Mm-hmm. So tell me some tricks. What do you do to get kids more focused on properly managing their own money?
Well, with my own kids, not to toot my own horn, of course, but my daughter, who's now in her teenage years, when she was quite young, when we go to the store, if I would swipe my debit card to make a purchase, I would just, she's really tiny. So in my sing-song mom voice, I'd say, okay, now that money's coming out of mommy's account, and I just narrate my transactions for her. Just made it a normal thing, an everyday thing, so that she started to understand it wasn't just some magic card I was using that let me buy whatever I wanted. And, and when she wanted to start doing dancing lessons and stuff, which get rather expensive, I'd sit her down and say, okay, well, this is how we're going to manage this from our budget, and show her the budget and everything. So she understands that, money is an everyday activity that you have to manage. And so that's worked for me. She's 13 now, and she has her own budget that she follows. And she just recently bought her own cell phone because she saved for it. And, it's because for her, money is just talking about it and managing it is just second nature for her, because it's always been something I've talked to about with her.
Yeah, I guess I'll toot my own horn too as well. We've always kept the kids very, very much involved in in not only managing their own money, but we use in our house Quicken, which is a program a lot of people use just to kind of enter their receipts and keep track of what's going on. And for years, the kids had to do it for themselves. And once a month, they would sit down and balance it with my wife, and they would go through it and then make sure that what they were spending on school and buses was okay. And then we would give them the money for the next month to pay for their food and buses. And they had to make it balance. And then it got to a point when they got older that they even would start entering my receipts into Quicken. So they'd really begin to see what was going on in the family.
Well, Doug, you go ahead and toot your own horn then, because that's great.
See, you can even hear the sirens in the background. They're so excited. They're running a big parade for me. Doug is so awesome.
That's great.
In fact, my daughter was a real entrepreneur. She was cited a couple of years ago. My daughter, who's now 20, but she was, I think, about 13 or 14. She was very entrepreneurial and started her own company, and she was teaching online and actually put aside money for retirement. And CNN did a story on teenagers who put aside money for retirement, and she was one of their highlighted kids.
And see, that's great. And that's a direct result of how she was raised and your willingness to discuss money and normalize it with her. I doubt kids are going to stumble across that themselves if their parents are closed about anything budget-wise and all that.
So give me some more ideas for how, I like your idea of talking through a transaction. What else can parents do to get their kids really focused on it?
Well, like you said, you have to have them budget. I think that it's important for parents to give kids an allowance and I think the kids need to earn that allowance too. It shouldn't just be an entitlement to them. And I know there's varying opinions on this among different people, but in my personal opinion, kids should do chores that are assigned to them. And then if they do them sufficiently, then they get their weekly allowance. And then from there, they're able to learn quickly how to budget. Even my younger son, who's a lot more free-spirited with his money, he learned very quickly that if he blew his allowance the first day he got it, then the rest of the week he's pretty miserable. So it's a lesson that he can only learn if he has access to money and learns about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things we talk about a lot with our kids is you get money. Some of it goes into savings. 20% goes to charity. That's kind of a philosophy in our family. Mm-hmm. And then they have money to spend that's available to them. So we found originally, in fact, maybe you have some suggestions. A lot of our kids became misers a little bit. They were so focused on saving. We had to encourage them. Some of the money really is for spending, and that's okay. How do you make them understand there's a balance?
Well, yeah, it's important as parents that we raise kids who are, good people. And an aspect of that is teaching them that it's important to give back to the community. And if that's not modeled for them, if they don't see you giving back 20%, they're going to say, well, why do I have to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's critical. I guess really is an example. And as I grow older, I see myself more and more like my parents. It's funny, I actually went with my father recently to the bank, and we both had to show ID. We were working on something together. So we both pulled out our wallet, we gave our ID to the banker, and we're both sitting there with our wallet open on our lap. And I realized that I had obviously learned this from him, which is when you take a card or like an ID or a credit card out of your wallet, don't put your wallet away till you get it back. That's how you remember to get it back. Mm-hmm. And I realized we must have looked like twins, except separated by about 30 years. But you're right, your parents teach you exactly, well, in many cases, kids really follow exactly along with what their parents did. So what's the earliest you can really start to teach kids about money?
Well, like I said, I started when my daughter, before she could even walk. And I don't know how much kids absorb at that age, but I've just always narrated transactions, told her what was going on. If I went to the ATM to get cash, I would explain that, that money is now out of my account and I don't have that money in my account anymore. And I had to be careful what I spend it on and all this. And, who knows how much kids learn at that age and retain. But it normalizes it at any rate. And so that's why I've always done that with them. So I don't think it's ever too young to just start getting it to be a normal occurrence for you to explain, this is what's happening as I make this transaction. This is what's happening as I'm writing this check to the utility company or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's right. As a kid is born, you say, listen, we don't have insurance. You're costing me $10,000 out of pocket. Yeah, welcome to the world.
They look, you don't cost me too much money.
All right, Tamsen. Tamsen, we are just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people learn more and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, all my books are available on Amazon and through other bookstores as well. My website is tamsenbutler.com, and you can also find me on Twitter at Tamsen Butler.
Okay, so we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Tamsen Butler, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.